Here's Shed. Off the window, no. Roberts tried to get it. Shed for the win. Got it. Jamal Shed plays the hero again.
Back to pass. Donovan Smith. Smith steps up in the pocket, unloads it, throws it all the way downfield into the end zone. Tipped, and it is caught. Caught by the Cougars. Caught for a touchdown. Unbelievable. Caught by Stephon Johnson.
Stick it in your pipe and smoke it, baby. Yes!
Welcome to the Scott Home Podcast, back 24 hours early in our not usual Monday night spot, but plenty of Cougar happenings to talk about. Big basketball game from Saturday. Maybe didn't go exactly how we wanted to, but I think we learned a lot about this team and still a lot of reasons to be encouraged by that team. A lot of reasons to be encouraged by Cougar football, which is back after the bye week with a very winnable road trip on Friday night. It would chance to get closer to the bowl eligibility that we thought was not necessarily so that we could hope for. So that's exciting. Plenty of Cougar sports beyond those two to talk about. Bobby, how you doing, friend?
Buddy, I am wonderful. Got a really important couple of days work-wise, but other than that, my parents were in town this past weekend. They decided to come in just for old time's sakes. And it is Veterans Day. Both my parents are veterans, so shout out to all of our veteran listeners. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for your service, all that. A lot of veterans I know are usually just like, yeah, whatever, when I say that to them. But yeah, thank you for that. And just, yeah, that's kind of how it's been.
Yeah, as I said, I am in the same time zone as you for once. I was visiting Houston. I was obviously at the Cougar basketball game on Saturday in Houston against Auburn. It's been nice to see the folks here. Nice to visit my hometown, the place where, you have somewhere where you tell everyone that you're from. And that's still, even though it's been like going on almost a decade of not living in Houston, which is kind of a crazy thing to say. It's still where I'm from, still a city I enjoy visiting and catching up with everything going on in Houston. Got to mention, of course, at the top here, if you haven't been doing so already, we got patreon.com/SH podcast. If you don't do so already, if you do that and you're listening to this episode, we thank you heartily. You are the people that keep us doing this. And if you're not, and that sounds like something you might want to do, patreon.com/SHPAWDcast, as little as 16 cents a day. That supports the work Bobby and I do. $5 a month if you have $5 a month to spare and you like what we do here in the show on a weekly basis, because we're always going to have this here. It's always going to be free to you. But if you want some more stuff, we've started doing men's basketball recaps. We've been doing since last season the football instant reacts after those games as well. So if any of that sounds good to you, if the thought of supporting our show sounds good to you, patreon.com/SH podcast. Of course, support our network friends at the 1012 Network, TEN12 Network, wherever you do social media. Charlie Hustle, our friends that make incredible vintage stuff. I'm wearing a Charlie Hustle shirt, the 5 Slamma Jamma white one on this stream here. Go to charliehustle.com. Use our promo code PAWD15 to save 15% on your order of a fantastic Houston Cougar collection. Bobby, I think that's all the housekeeping. A lot of stuff to talk about tonight. And I think we got a lead. I think for the first time this season that we have sports to talk about, and it's not football leading the way, which I think is pretty cool. I know we did the basketball preview during the bye week, so I guess that kind of counts. But we have on-court action that's leading the show that's not football, which is no shot at football. But Cougar men's basketball had a pretty big game this past weekend. Unfortunately, a 74-69 loss to the Auburn Tigers, the number 11 Auburn Tigers. But you had a March-like atmosphere, I would go so far as to call, at the Toyota Center for your first real test of the Cougar men's basketball team in the season. After we published our last episode, just over 24 hours from tip-off, we had the news trickle out Friday that Auburn had to turn around their charter plane because of a fight between multiple Auburn players. Initial incorrect reporting indicated that starters were involved, but from what we've learned, the actual involved players were fourth-year junior Jaheim Hudson and freshman Ja'Kai Howard, neither of whom were starters, though I would think one or both probably would have featured off the bench in a reality where those two guys don't get into a fight and have their charter jet get forced to be turned around. Is a game that we already knew was going to have a lot of eyes on. I think that only added to the hype around it, but I mean, it was going to have a lot of hype just because of the pedigree of these teams. And it was a game that ultimately lived up to that hype. I mean, it's not the final result that any Houston fan, present company included, would have wanted, but it was a good basketball game. I don't think anyone could argue that. Not the certainly not the only great early season non-conference men's basketball matchup that we've had this year, but if you are someone who's just a general college basketball fan and you've been trying to watch all the best early games, you wouldn't have found many that beat this one for close, dramatic back and forth and two very high quality opponents. I think if you're a Cougar fan, obviously you'd prefer this marquee game have happened at the Fertitta Center. Wouldn't disagree with you, hypothetical Cougar fan, at that point, but I would rather this game have happened at the Toyota Center than traded it out in a scenario where you're playing a much weaker opponent in a true home game. I think you learn more about this team. The coaching staff certainly learned more about this Cougar roster than if you had played a weaker opponent. And you only learn meaningful things about yourself from testing yourself against high-quality opponents. Yeah, I think I've seen U of H fans talk about this team struggling or being cursed in neutral site games, which is an absurd thing to say given that the NCAA tournament is played at neutral sites and this team hasn't been eliminated during the first weekend since 2018. You play these games because, believe it or not, losses are valuable. Kelvin Sampson has weekly media availability earlier today and it seemed like he was in a good mood, which is kind of a funny thing to say after a loss. One of my favorite Sampsonisms is when he talks about generally not wasting the teaching opportunity coming off a loss, and the way you get guys' attention better off a loss. So I will hand the mic back to you, Bobby, at the risk of telling anyone how to, feel. I think you can keep two general thoughts in your head. One, wishing that U of H had won because this game did feel like it was there for the taking. And U of H, it's not that you won't have tons of opportunities to get wins against a high-level opponent, but this still would have been a really good one. And two, this team can and will be better for the lessons they learned from not closing this one out, Bobby. We're going to lead this off in kind of familiar ways we do the football, but what are your general thoughts before we talk about our three key, possibly overlooked plays from the Auburn game?
Yeah, I think for me, just kind of general, we'll kind of dive into our deep thoughts on what this game looked like and all that here in a minute. But just kind of general thoughts. I am not upset with a loss here. I mean, yes, would you prefer to win it? Absolutely. Who wouldn't prefer to win, right? But, kind of at the end of it all, when I really think about it, these are the ones that you kind of want to, that you're okay with. You are, you want to test yourself. These are great things to test yourself early on. You want to test yourself and make sure that what you're seeing is kind of what you're expecting. I think you're going to learn a lot about rotations and things like that and what guys are going to do and look like on this team. And again, we'll talk more about that here in a minute after we go over these three plays. But that was kind of my takeaway, is that I'm not disappointed with this loss. Yeah, I'd like to win it, but this isn't like one of those losses that's going to drop you from a 1 seed or, at the end of the year, you're looking at it going, oh no, we're not going to make the tournament because we didn't win this game.
Yeah, we have no idea what Auburn's going to be in mid-March because we have no idea what anyone's going to be in mid-March, but I feel like it's a pretty safe bet that in 4 months' time, this will still be one of the better teams in college basketball. Just what we saw from that team, unless they lose significant chunks of their starters and rotation guys, like it's going to be one of the best teams out there. That's a team that I think probably has the inside track right now to win the SEC, if we're being honest. So like I alluded to a second ago, we're not going to do this every basketball game. As much as it would be funny to make Bobby and I try to find three key plays from the UL Lafayette game coming up after this one, this will kind of be a special occasion thing. But I think one that's useful, and I think it's interesting, or at least as I did this, I found it interesting to kind of approach this in a different manner. Like what constitutes a significant overlooked play for a basketball game versus what we've been doing week in, week out for football. So, Bobby, if you don't mind leading this off, what were your three overlooked plays from the Auburn basketball game?
Yep. So I, kind of looking here, I kind of went mainly in the second half. 13:40 left in the game. Broom gets a big dunk. Kind of unopposed. He starts out at the 3-point line. Nobody's in the lane. That dunk cuts at the 5. They get a stop on the next possession for U of H. On the fast break, they get an easy layup, cuts it to 3. Felt a big momentum shift because they got those 2 buckets kind of right back to back. And that was a real momentum changing kind of series. I don't necessarily want to call it a single play. I think when you and I discussed it, we talked about doing plays/moments. That felt like a pretty big one there. That dunk and then getting the stop in the transition easy bucket on transition. They didn't have a traditional fast break, but they were out kind of running. One guy, I can't remember who it was, kind of gets back a little late and get a free layup. So that cuts the lead to 3, and you could just kind of see Kelvin Sampson calls a timeout there, and you could just kind of feel the momentum changing a little bit. Then I moved to 8:38 left in the second half. More defensive confusion for the Cougs. Broom gets an easy layup to tie it at 49-49. You kind of saw Broom and the team kind of fit in Auburn kind of fake a swing out and play going one way, and Broom is unguarded. And if there's one guy you can't not guard on that Auburn team, it's going to be him. And, I'm going to talk about this guy when we talk about the game in a deeper way, but Tugler kind of looked like a sophomore there. You know what I mean? And that's going to happen sometimes. And then with 4:14 left in the game, Pettiford nails a 3 to put Auburn up by 2. LJ Cryer comes down, puts up a mid-range jumper. You're kind of just going, is that a high percentage shot? Is that a shot? I
remember that play. Dustin, co-host emeritus, good friend of ours, is sitting next to me. I kind of immediately after the LJ Cryer shot, I was like, feels like we're pressing here.
Yep. And so it just was just one of those things where you just kind of felt like, not loving this right now. Not loving this. Cryer puts up the mid-range. It misses. Auburn gets the ball back. Broom goes down and just hits the easy bucket. It's over at that point. I mean, the Cougs kind of came back and they led, but it just felt like this game was pretty much done at that point. I think the Cougs come back and maybe gain the lead by one more time in the game. It flips on the next possession and it's game over from there.
That was my second key play. The Todd Pettiford made 3-pointer at 4:14 to put. I don't know if it put Auburn up for good, but it felt like that was kind of the turning point. Like it was proverbially like the team like holding their hands up to the dam that's like water's pooling, it's about to burst on you, and like Todd Pettiford hits what felt like his umpteenth shot in a row, and he got some good looks there, but like the kid was feeling it. Like you're like, oh yeah, that's why he's a 5-star, recruited by basically everybody in the country. Like that kid's gonna be special. Like I don't know if he's a 1 year and done kind of special player, if that's how he projects, but that guy's gonna be a ball player. I don't think that's reading too much into this one game. So my first key play was, and I actually originally was going to have Milos Uzon's 5th foul on here, but I kind of talked myself out of it because I was just like, okay, but is that really overlooked? Like that's actually one that like probably gets attention. So because I think this one is more significant, I actually went with his 4th foul. It was at the 9:13 mark in the second half for my first play, because like really you got a 9-point lead. It was 41-32 at one point in the second half, but even before that 4th foul, Auburn was already kind of starting to get back in it, and you were starting to see this team struggle. The fact that you could not have Uzon on the court between 9:13 and I think 4-something when he got subbed in, I feel like that made a situation that was already developing favorably for Auburn into an incredibly favorable. Because we're going to get to it when we go more in depth, but you really didn't have an answer when he wasn't on the court. You really didn't have somebody who was willing and able, not maybe the willing part was there, but able to step into that role, able to be the primary ball handler, able to keep your offense from feeling like it was stagnating. It was even stagnating sometimes he was out there, but any problems you have, I think, got worse. So for me, might not have gotten attention, but the fact that he went out at that point and that 5-minute stretch is when Auburn, I think, really started applying pressure, really started making, I think like the tail end, like right when he goes in is when Pettiford hits that shot to put Auburn up for good. I don't know if he's on the court for that one, but that was a really pivotal 5 minutes, and 5 minutes where you didn't have the point guard and where you kind of saw one of the real flaws of this team, not having a guy who can, be a secondary ball handler that's not named Milos Uzon. My second play, that Todd Pettiford made 3-pointer at 4:14 left in the second half. Don't have any like really unique points that Bobby didn't say there. Just felt like a really pivotal moment of this game. Like I want to go to the play-by-play look and see if that was the last time that Auburn didn't have the lead. Don't know if that's the case, but it felt like that was when they got the momentum to win this game. Not really saying anything that you didn't say. I think we did not review this beforehand between us, but I think we have pretty much the same logic for having that as one of our 3 plays. And I picked this one as kind of an overlooked play just because I wanted to give this guy some shine, because I'm going to, and you're probably going to as well point out, like, hey, there's a lot of moments where this guy wasn't ready for the extreme challenges of Janai Broom and what Auburn was trying to do. JoJo Tugler, I want to give him his props. I'm singling out this where he made 2 free throws to keep the Cougars within 2 points with just over 3 minutes left, because free throw shooting, as much as he was really fantastic last year, free throw shooting was a big problem for JoJo Tugler. Free throw shooting is a big problem for this team. And I think broadly, I can't pick a bunch of different free throw attempts as a play, but if you want to criticize the Cougars for a lot in the second half, there's a lot of red meat there. The free throw shooting was actually pretty good. The free throw shooting actually is one of the things that kept you in that longer than maybe you should have. And I wanted to shout Tugler for making 2 free throws at a point where the Cougars were really clinging on, and as much as he struggled at times, doing his best to keep the team in it. I think him and Javier Francis were both perfect from the charity stripe in the second half, which is cool. And I wanted to make sure in a loss that I still singled out a good thing that JoJo Tugler did at a really key point of the game.
I think those are great plays. Just as an aside, because we both were kind of wondering, I pulled up the play-by-play. After that 3-pointer, that made the game 62-60. They got it up to 66-62. Cougs go on a slight run to go 67-66. The next possession, Baker Mazzara hits a jumper, and the Cougs don't see the lead the rest of the game.
Yeah, my brain wanted to tell me that wasn't the very last time,
yeah.
But it was a turning point. Like it was definitely worth signifying as a turning point. So, Bobby, we'll go a little more in depth here. Where would you like to start with this one and your thoughts now that we've both had a couple of days to marinate on this game?
So, I actually kind of wrote them down, and they're kind of rambling, talking offense, defense, all that. So I'm just going to lay my thoughts out, and then I'd love to hear yours. First of all, the first thing I want to say is what a fun game to watch. Just to be a basketball fan and to watch that game, so much fun. This defense.
I think I would have enjoyed it more as a third party, but yeah, great basketball game.
Yeah, just a good basketball game overall. Swings and momentum where you have big game. You heard the Auburn fans at points. You heard the Houston fans at points. The crowd was into it. Just a great atmosphere over at Toyota. I would have enjoyed it being at Fertitta a little bit more, but beggars, choosers, all that kind of stuff. Defense, ton of fun to watch on both sides of the ball. But as far as the Cougs go, the big thing with this team is the same thing we see every year. This team can go stretches, long stretches, without putting the ball in the bucket. Whether it's from the charity stripe, or it's from, a bucket in general. They go stretches without scoring against good defenses, and this Auburn defense is a good defense. Halfway through the first half, there was about a 4-minute stretch where the Cougs didn't get a point. And that's not a point. That's not a free throw. They didn't get any points whatsoever. And the Cougs were up 1 to down 7 in that stretch. And against good teams like Auburn, you can't go 4 minutes without a bucket. That's, when you think about it, 4 minutes is about 5, probably 4 or 5 possessions. With the shot clock, if you're taking it down all the way, misses, fast breaks, it's about 4 or 5 possessions if I had to guess. I'm not saying you need to score every single possession, but 4 minutes without a single bucket, whether it's a free throw or anything, and you give up 8 in that time, that's tough. That means the other team's scoring and you're not. If you're not going to score, you can't let the other team score. Not that I'm sharing this, huge, deep philosophy. And then early in the second half, the Cougs have the same stretch where they put up 2 points in a 5-minute stretch. Not great, man. It's just not great. The Cougs were up 7 at that point. And by the end of it, they were only up 1. Kind of watching it, it felt like the ball just kind of stalled at times with this offense. It kind of shows in the stats as well. Sam, I don't know if you looked this up or if you wrote this down, but how many assists did the Cougs have on the night? You don't have to say it because I know the answer.
I don't have the box score in front of me.
So what do you think it was?
I think it was it 7?
It's 7. That's not a lot, man.
I think I don't have it up for this. I did put my notes for this, but I think I had that when I did the bonus recap. Plug.
Yeah, and 7 assists when your opponent has 14, that's a tough look. That to me signifies that the ball's standing still. One of the things this team has always been really good at is getting the ball on the perimeter and ball movement, right? Making the extra pass. we weren't able to do that. And 7 assists in a 40-minute game just isn't very good. Let's just be honest with each other. That being said, there's zero panic in me at all with this. This defense looked good and tough. We won the rebound battle, which is if the Cougs are winning the rebound battle, we got a shot, right? That's always kind of been one of those things that that Sampson we've always had. I did like seeing the scoring shared as much as it was 5 guys in double digits. Love that. I thought Uzan looked good as well. I think going forward, the big thing this team's going to need is figure out who gets the ball when they just need a shut the F up basket is what I always call it. You know, you're playing on the road in a tough game. You're up 2 or 3. The other team's on an 8-0 run. Who do you give the ball to just take over and just make a bucket? To tell the fans, shut the F up. To tell the other team, that was cute. You went on your little run, but we're going to stay ahead. Who does that here? Who does that for this team? You saw that with Broom. In the second half, he had 10 points, like 6 minutes into the second half. He had 10 more to put this game out of reach. You saw him at times in this game putting his hand up and just yelling at his players, give me the ball, I'm going to score. And he took Wani to the basket multiple times. You saw it. Like I said, 13 minutes left in the game. He only had 10. He ended with 20. That's a guy taking over a game going, all right, it's time for us to pull this through. And Shed's gone. Shed was that guy. Who's going to be that guy this year? Who's going to do it? And that's why you play these games, right? You play these games because then you can go, hey, we need one of these guys. I would imagine Sampson tonight or yesterday in a practice goes, guys, who's going to step up? You think it's going to be Sharp, maybe LJ Cryer? You have the guys on the team who have the ability to do it. It's now a mindset thing, right? Whenever I talk to people, whenever I'm sitting at a bar or something and I hear the LeBron Michael debate pop up, always a fun one to kind of jump into. I always think LeBron's a better basketball player. But what made Michael different is at the end of the game, you could put 4 guys on Michael. Who was getting the basketball?
Michael. Yeah.
Michael was getting the basketball every single time. So who is going to be that guy for this team? I also think this game showed some flaws in Tugler. He definitely had some moments where he looked like a sophomore. He was getting beat constantly. You found himself out of position. But I think also you're going to have Javier Francis back. You're not going to have Tugler on the floor as much. But what I've seen with Tugler is from last year even to this year, he's better at some things. And this feels like a player who is going to be better in March. He's going to be exponentially better in March than he is in November. I think the Joseph Tugler that we see in March would beat the November Tugler in a game of one-on-one 11-3. I think we're going to see a big step forward with him this year because he's just going to be on the court and playing. The question is those January games when Javier Francis gets himself into a little bit of foul trouble, can we depend on Tugler to stop the bleeding? So those were kind of some of my thoughts. I know I kind of rambled and went on a bunch of different tangents, but that's kind of just my observation is like there's zero panic, but there's definitely things that you can see. You can talk a little bit about the rotation. I'm sure you'll talk about that. I talked about the depth and how I was excited for the depth in this team, and then we played like 9 guys. It's like there's some guys.
Was Ramon Walker for like 2 minutes.
Yeah, and it's like, but you heard Sampson in his presser today. You mentioned him in the presser talking about how like, oh yeah, these are why we play these games because I need to find a way to get Mercy Miller in there more. I need to find a way to get Terrence Arsenault in there a little bit more. That's why I play this game because now we can work on that rotation. So, what were your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree with you. Like, I think you have the like who's going to be the go-to guy, who's going to have the SDFU to do the like G-rated version or PG-rated version of that basket, because it was definitely Jamal Shed. He wasn't necessarily your first option last year, but we needed a big shot, a big moment, or a guy to shut up the opposing crowd. It was absolutely Jamal Shed for this program last year. Maybe a combination of him and Marcus Sasser this season before that. And you have multiple potential answers to that at multiple different positions. Like, I think I think Wani Roberts could be that guy. I think definitely Sharp and Cryer could be, different answers to that question, but no one looked ready for that right at the moment that we potentially needed on Saturday, which isn't a substantive criticism of those guys. It's more, it's why you play this opponent. Like Auburn in every way possible is a torture test. Like they are going to stress you defensively. They're going to stress you offensively. Like Bruce Pearl teams are always going to play at a high level, physical, defensively. Like as much as I didn't love every single one of their calls, shouldn't be a surprise to anyone that Houston and Auburn produced 41 fouls over the course of a basketball game. These are two teams that are never going to lack for physicality, no matter the specific players on the roster. That's just Kelvin Sampson and Bruce Pearl teams, not to take away the credit from the players, and figuring out who the go-to guys are. Like you don't learn that if you play like the Ken Pom 135 team. Like they might challenge you a little bit here and there. You may not get nothing out of that game, but you're not going to have nearly the stress test that Auburn is going to provide, or a team of, Auburn's caliber, which is to say top 5 or 6 in the country like them. Like that's why you play these games, to learn that kind of stuff. I think the painful what if for me, not that I'm saying like, oh, if he plays at his normal minutes, Houston 100% wins this game. But if you don't have Javier Francis on an obvious minutes restriction, that's what I wonder. And maybe, who knows, maybe he plays a similar amount of minutes and just gets into foul trouble in one of these different scenarios. I don't know. That's why I'm not saying for sure. You just saw you saw JoJo Tugler's weaknesses here. You saw a guy who didn't play a full season of college basketball last year, who was young by freshman standards, who's still young by sophomore standards. Like you didn't see not necessarily any good things from him, but Janai Broome is a tough matchup. That's a 5th-year senior. That is a guy who, when it's all said and done this year, has a very realistic case for being the best big man in college basketball. That's how good that guy is. Like I don't think I was overselling him by saying when we preview this game, he might be the best big man you see all season. That's not like you're seeing Hunter Dickinson and a lot of other really good big men, but in terms of all around, like he has the offensive game, he has the defensive game, he has the ability to rebound with gusto against a Houston team that prides itself on that. But Janai Broome is going to be one of those few guys who can actually really challenge the Cougars in that way. So love JoJo Tugler, probably isn't ready for defending Janai Broome for 30 plus minutes in his career at this point, but that's how you learn. Like that's how you get better, is by really getting humbled by a guy who's 3 years older than you. And because, if you put Janai Broome now against, Janai Broome at sophomore year at Morehead State, probably not gonna get the same result. Or no, that would have been his first year at Auburn, because he had a freshman season at Morehead State, because we were in on him among many other schools. That's what you get for being a 5th-year college player. Like the years of experience and all the tricks of the trade that he's learned. It was a clinic in good big man play. Like you got some of that from Roberts, but even he didn't necessarily stack up to how well Broome did there. And you saw good things in stretches from LJ Cryer, who I think you expected to be your most skilled scorer, but he did get a lot of his points in a brief period of the first half. You didn't get as much down the stretch from him when you needed it. Ditto for Emmanuel Sharp, even though he did hit some good second half shots. Like you didn't necessarily see anybody, guard or forward, step up. Like it seemed like at times the guys most willing to shoot, just like when they had the ball, were Milos Uzan and Malik Wilson. God bless those guys, but you don't want you want LJ Cryer to have the instinct to shoot it the second he has a bit of daylight. You want Emmanuel Sharp to be that guy. In a different way, you almost want Wani Roberts to be that guy, though at different parts of the court. Maybe not necessarily Wilson and Uzan.
Right.
So on. There was one, I think it was like a contested deep 2 that Wilson attempted in the second half as Auburn was kind of getting back in the game, and almost at the same time, Dustin and I were both just like, no, that's not the shot. Auburn wants you to take a deep contested 2 there, Blake Wilson. I think in the obvious major priority moving forward, I think we've both at this point mentioned this at least in passing. You got to figure out who besides Milos Uzan is your point guard or creator when Uzan's on the bench or is in foul trouble. Like you don't want to play that guy 40 minutes a game. It's just not practical. He's going to be in foul trouble sometimes. He's going to be a less effective player if you're asking him to go 40 minutes every game or something very close to 4 minutes. You are going to need to be able to figure out a way to be effective offensively without him on the court. Didn't get from LJ Cryer. I think Malik Wilson was kind of the de facto backup point guard. I remember when Uzan subbed out for 4 fouls that Wilson was the guy that subbed in for him. It seemed like Wilson was the one who was bringing it up more often than not when Uzan was on the bench. So maybe he develops into that guy. Maybe Auburn was just a bad game. Maybe we see over the course of the season he becomes that guy. But I think you need, at least in stretches, Cryer to be more comfortable doing that. I remember when Cryer came in this program, that was a big part of him coming in this program. Not that he wanted to come in here and be the primary point guard, because he was coming into a program where there was like Jamal Shed was here. Like you aren't unseating that guy as the primary point guard, but he wanted to get better at that part of his game. He wanted to be a better defender, which I think he very much has. And he wanted to be a better creator, a guy who could at least add the ability to create with the ball in his hands and the ability to at least fill in as the point guard to his skill set, and wasn't able to really give you that on Saturday night. Not to say he can't give you that, not to say I have any like long-term concerns about the guy as a player, just what we saw from this game. You got to figure out somebody besides Miles Uzan, who I thought did a lot of good stuff. Like I don't have a lot bad to say about what he did. You really saw a couple different times. You saw him really do a great job getting to the basket. And that's a part of his game I'm really excited about, because you're going to face Auburn level opponents this year. Like you got some really good opponents in Big 12 play. Still, most of your teams, and I would say even the better teams, aren't going to give you the physicality that Auburn does. Auburn's still going to be in the very high end of all the teams you see this year, which I think it's exciting to see what Uzan can do in situations that are not that. And I think your team defense, now that you're, without Jamal Shed, probably needs some more to get back to truly elite level. I saw some takes, not really from Cougar fans, right? I think it was actually from a couple of college basketball writers who were just like in the first half, like, wow, like Houston just doesn't drop off defensively. Like it just really, and like this is still a good team defensively. It's still a very, very good defensive team. Like you're still, even after this performance, number one in KenPom defensive efficiency. Granted, everything's kind of small sample size, so take all of that with a grain of salt. This is still a very good defensive team, but I think and Auburn presents unique challenges, and I'm reasonably confident in a few months we'll have a team that's back to the elite standard. But I think this game was a reminder. I mean, you gave up a lot of points in the last 10 minutes. You gave up 46 in the second half. I mean, it was 33-28 at halftime, and Auburn finished with 74. And I know some of that was from the free throw line, but they scored a lot of points on you. It was more points than you're usually seeing get scored against this Cougar team. And so I think a chance for this coaching staff to show these guys on film, because it's one thing to say, hey, you need to do this, and this better. It's another thing to have actual game film to say, hey, this is where we're not getting better. And it goes back to, we talked about, like Kelvin Sampson's never going to waste a loss. Kelvin Sampson, much as he wants to win every game, like knows there is value in teaching guys off a loss, knows that you get guys' attention off a loss, sometimes more than, well, like, hey, you won, but you can't get away with this. Whereas this one's like, hey, like y'all didn't get away with this. So I think that was valuable. I wanted to see more than 12 minutes of Terrence Arsenault. Not saying more than 12 minutes of Terrence Arsenault means this is an automatic win. Wanted to see more of him. Certainly in the second half. He had like a stretch that he came in there, but you didn't really, I don't think you saw him at all in the last like 12 minutes or so of the game, which I don't know if that makes a difference. Maybe the coaching staff saw something and just saw him struggling against what Auburn was doing. I don't know if maybe he isn't. Like, I don't know if he's the answer.
Right.
Maybe a guy who can create with the ball in his hands. I'm just kind of throwing that out there now with a lot of evidence on it. But like, maybe he's ultimately the answer to some questions that you didn't get answered by the team out there. And you mentioned like Sampson talking about wishing he'd maybe given Mercy Miller a look in the first half as well. Not saying he goes out there and equals everything that Tahad Pettiford does, but you saw Tahad Pettiford get a lot more minutes in the second half. This isn't me saying Bruce Pearl comprehensively outcoached Kelvin Sampson, but Bruce Pearl got his freshman out there. He got into a little bit of a rhythm, and this kid ended up basically with Janai Broom taking over the game in the second half, being 1A, 1B, the reason why your opponent won this basketball game and made your defense look, I think, very, very not the typical Cougar defense. I mean, you got to tip your hat to Pettiford and Janai Broom. Very good players and a very good opponent. But also, I think this team is going to be better at the things that Auburn specifically took advantage of when it's all said and done, in some part because you got humbled in some ways by this Auburn team.
Yeah, I think because of... I think you and I had the discussion that, like, yeah, these games are... You'd rather play these than the 100 to 150. And I agree with you to a certain extent. I don't love playing a ton of these games, especially with the conference being the way it is, but you are going to
play a few of these to be clear.
Yeah, and so it's going to be you learn something out of this game, And now with it being the second game, you have plenty of time to kind of do your adjustment here.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think anybody should be reading anything negative into like what this team's doing. Like, again,
Yep.
it's better to take this loss early, like, and learn from it. The basketball season is a marathon, which is something I like about it, that you could be a better team, that you are afforded a chance to grow because the margins aren't so thin that you're 1 or 2 losses away from not being able to achieve really great things, that you can lose 6 or 7 times minimum and still be a better team for it in mid to late March, which I think this Cougar team will eventually do. I think we'll eventually find the go-to guy offense, like you're talking about earlier. I think we'll eventually JoJo Tugler will be somebody more ready for prime time against the better opponents, that will have guys who are more capable of spelling Milo's use on than they showed on Saturday. Like, I think these can all be fixed. These are just the issues we saw from this basketball game. And again, why you play this basketball game in early November, to really get on film and really emphasize to you guys what needs to be worked on before you face a really tough conference schedule, before you play in the big tournament that decides it all that stuff.
Yeah.
Kind of, I was gonna say, like, anything after talking about a game matching up these two top 10 teams. I know Auburn was technically 11 at the time, but these are two of the best 10 teams in the country. Like, I would have rather beat the Fertitta Center, by the way. Like, I was about to transition to the UL Lafayette game, but rather be the Fertitta Center. I think it's good to get kind of the neutral site feel to it. Like, I think it's good to play away from your arena every so often. Like
you do in March.
Yeah,
you
like
do
the
in
Toyota,
March and April.
The Toyota Center is. I think you probably have a little bigger crowd for a March Madness game. That was a bad crowd, but for a little bigger crowd. But like, that's, in a lot of ways, that game was a simulation of, other than maybe crowd size, like what a Sweet 16 Elite 8 kind of matchup is going to be like. Also, not going to do very much fan chiding, because I thought it was a good amount of Cougars there, and frankly, if you're listening, there's a good chance that you were a higher level fan, and I don't like fan chiding, and I don't even think this constitutes fan chiding, but I do wish the fans that we had that had been there, because Auburn definitely was not the majority. Auburn was like maybe 30, max 35, and I'm probably overestimating that percent of the fans there. They made the noise of like 50, 60% of the fans. Like, I wish our fans that had been there had really taken the assignment as seriously as the Auburn fans that showed up to the Fertitta Center on Saturday night. And that's the closest I'll get to fan chiding, but I'll just say that as somebody who was there, wish we had been as loud as they were. And they, as much as I didn't enjoy the company of every single Auburn fan I was around, I can tip my hat and say they did a good job making as much noise as that group of people, and giving their team support at key times, maybe a little bit more than we did. So off even the semblance of a soapbox here. And let's talk about a dramatically less interesting opponent, but the necessary things of conference, because you don't have if every game is this level of game, it's just going to be like, your team is going to be so beat up by the time it's conference play. It's a different animal to talk about the Auburn game. Now this is a Big 12 program, like those games were so critical when you were in an AAC program, because it was like, okay, but we're going to get to conference play, and there's going to be 2, maybe 4 or 5 games that have even remote, feel like they have that kind of stakes. Like, feel like you're playing another really good basketball team. It's more just like, okay, you're going to go into a Ken Palm 100 to 150 teams gym and be like their Super Bowl. That was your AAC season. That's not where you're getting Big 12 play. So back to the necessary evil part of the non-conference schedule. You're going to be playing the UL Lafayette Raging Cajuns Wednesday night at the Fertitta Center. They lost their Monday night season opener last Monday, a week ago, to a usually pretty respectable mid-major, Kent State. Beat D3 UT Dallas by 17 on Thursday night. I love doing this, Bobby. I'm going to put you on the spot as a DFW resident and somebody who spent a decent chunk of his life cumulatively in the Metroplex without cheating. Do you know what UT Dallas's mascot is? I do.
I
know they're technically in Richardson too, but we're going to call them UT Dallas because they want to be called that.
It's one of those that is like, if you hadn't asked me, I'd have been like, oh yeah, the UT Dallas mascot is so-and-so. What is it?
The Comets.
Oh yeah, I did know that. With their orange and green. What a weird color combo for a Comet-based school.
Yeah, exactly. Shout out to the UT Dallas computer science majors.
There's actually a really nice driving range, and when you pull into the driving range, you're like on UT Dallas's campus, or like right next to it. So you have all the banners on the street are all UT Dallas. Just a little side note.
But the team we're actually playing, UL Lafayette, and to be clear, I'm the one that got us on this tangent, but the Raging Cajuns are coached by Bob Marlin, was a longtime Sam Houston State head coach before that, has led the Cajuns to a couple tournament appearances, including the 23 NCAA tournament over about 11, 12 years there. I think generally has them as a top half of the Sun Belt program. They were 4th out of 14 in the preseason Sun Belt men's basketball poll. Bobby, anything you found out worth sharing about the Raging Cajuns?
Kentrell Garnett, 5th-year guard, averaged 9 points a game last year, but through 2 games, he's at 12.5 points. So if you kind of look at his stats, his career stats, he went from like 2 points to 6.5 points to 9 to 12.5. He's, we love to say on the Scott Holman podcast, you and my the past host Dustin getting his second shout out of the episode. Way to go, Dustin. You guys used to say, or still do say, that progress isn't linear. He's one of the rare cases where it does appear to be linear. So just noticed him. He's able to score 12.5 points per game. Another guy to watch is Mustafa El Mutalaki Keel?
Muataukil, I think. I don't know. I have not.
I tried to find pronunciation. His previous junior college doesn't have it. Ooh La La doesn't have it. I found like a clip of him, like his highlight video. It's just music. I was like, we're going into this completely blind here. But anyways, he's
Mustafa,
a JUCO transfer.
Mustafa.
Yeah. JUCO transfer junior. Watch the highlight video. Kind of salty. Hopefully we see some of the bench from them, or we see some of our bench. Just, Samson has talked about the rotation. These are the games where you start using some of the things you learned from the Auburn game. More Mercy Miller, more Terrence Arsenault. You start to get Javier Francis back in game shape because Samson said, it's not that he's not healthy. It's just he's not in game shape yet. Arsenault, part of the reason why he came out, I don't know if you saw this, was the tendon, his Achilles tendon was starting to get sore. And considering that's what he hurt last year.
That makes sense. I hadn't considered that, but that
yeah. They said it was getting sore, so he wanted to take him out and just kind of. So, do you see him play a little bit more? Even though it was tender, do you maybe see him trying to get the strength back in that a little bit with some game speed, that kind of stuff? So maybe you're going to start seeing some more rotation. We may see Sedlot here, who we didn't see versus Auburn, and I would have thought he would have got a couple of minutes in the game somewhere along the way. If you're going to want to make a deep run, you'd love to see Sedlot be able to come in and just kind of play 10, 12 minutes when a guy is in foul trouble. This is a game where you might be able to get him some of the experience there.
Yeah, I don't have a whole ton to add. I do feel for Cajun fans because they had a preseason first team all-conference guy, Hosanna Kitinge, and he suffered a non-contact practice injury in mid-October. It's going to sideline him for all the current season, according to their coach, Bob Marlin. Was their only preseason all-conference pick, but gives an opportunity for their freshman big Jeremiah Evans, who's played a decent amount in these first 2 games. Kind of a trial by fire against the combination of Wani Roberts, Javier Francis, and Jojo Tugler. As well, you mentioned Mustafa, really intriguing swingman. Kentrell Garnett had him in my notes as well. Won't be the worst or second worst team we face in non-conference. I'm confident saying that. But one, the Cougs should also comfortably win by probably a mid-20s or so final margin. I'm sure the Cajuns wish they were facing U of H off a close Saturday win instead of the loss, but like you said, chance to see the Cougars, I think, start to add what they've learned from that, the humbling experiences you had at times against Auburn.
Yep.
Switching sports here, we're going to go to the Cougar football team, who are going to be, for the second time in 3 games, taking on a former Pac-12, new Big 12 program where the vibes are pretty bad. It was Utah a couple of games before this one. It is now the Arizona Wildcats, who the Cougars will be traveling to face on Friday evening in Tucson. Some quick overview stuff. The Wildcats are currently 3-6 for the season on a 5-game losing streak. Like the Cougars, they have a first-year head coach. Their coach is Brent Brennan, as their previous head coach, Jed Fish, took the same job at Washington. The domino effect of Kalen DeBoer leaving Washington for Alabama. Brendan's an Arizona alum, was the head coach for a pretty good run at a notoriously difficult job, San Jose State. But the general disappointment, I would say, stems from the fact that this team was picked 5th in the Big 12 preseason, returned a super productive quarterback-receiver tandem, Noah Fafita and Tedero McMillan. Those two guys actually played together going back to their days at SoCal Prep Power Servite. McMillan's the highest rated recruit in Arizona program history, but we'll kind of get to that. More than 2 guys to win football games. So, Bobby, I've hogged the mic enough here at the top. What have you learned that you think is worth sharing about this Arizona Wildcats team we're going to see on Friday?
Yeah, man, they're just not very good. Not to just belabor the point. Their quarterback, to your point, he has 13 touchdowns with 10 interceptions. It's not great, bud. That's not great, especially when you were predicted in coming back in. Yeah, and
he was as a freshman last year. He was so
good
at not turning the ball over.
Yeah. 13-10 is not great. One of the things that I found absolutely hilarious looking at the I went to SP Plus. Do you know what their SP Pluses are?
I do not, because
it cracked me up.
I was gonna say I have an ESPN Plus login for my TV, but I have been just too lazy to do it on my computer. I've become less than an advanced stat guy. Sorry. Tell me.
No, 77 on offense and 78 on defense. It's so funny because normally with SP Plus,
like low 50s or high 50s, low 60s on offense and like 80s on defense. That's interesting. It's always interesting when that doesn't match up with my perception.
Yeah, and one thing I always notice with the SP Plus is like usually one team is really good at something and there's like a 10, 15 or more difference between their spots, you know. You very rarely, unless they're an elite team, you know, very rarely do you see them at 77 and 78. It's so wonderfully bad mid on both sides of the ball. Like U of H, awful offense, solid defense. You know, there's a 50-point gap. There's a 50-team gap between them. Nope. And despite being 77 on offense, 78 on defense, they're 76th in SP Plus. So
and if you're not watching this,
I just thought that was kind of funny. Just kind of looking at it, something I kind of wanted to point out. So wonderfully mid on both sides. In 7 Big 12 games, they've given up less than 30 points twice. And one was to that bad Utah offense. That Utah offense doesn't score 30 on anybody. The other was the next week when they gave up 28 to Tech. So it's not like they have a lot of like 14-point defensive performances, things like that. And the offense has scored 30 points 0 times in those 7 Big 12 games. Now, I'm not saying we have a better offense or anything like that. Our offense is bad. But what I am saying is that this Cougar defense, has an opportunity to turn the ball over, get the ball from the Arizona offense, and give this Cougar offense that struggles quite a bit an opportunity on some short fields and can get after him. So I see this defense making some plays. I see this defense holding this Arizona offense, and this Arizona defense we've moved the ball better. We've moved the ball well against better defenses. We've also moved the ball worse against worse offenses or defenses too. So, you know, as we've said with just about every game, going into every game, it's kind of a what offense shows up, and the defense is probably going to be good, but we've seen some stinkers. But I'm now, you know, we're 9 games into the season. We're almost done, but it's definitely a point where I'm like, oh yeah, the defense is going to show up. If the defense doesn't show up, it's a surprise for me. If the offense shows up, it's a surprise for me.
That's fair. In all my years of previewing teams in this podcast, Bobby, I don't know if I've seen an offense more reliant on one receiver or back, just reliant on one player, period, than this Arizona offense is on Tedero McMillan in the pass game. Coming into this game, Bobby, he has 1,066 receiving yards on 63 receptions. That's his season line. He isn't just leading the receiving yards. He has more receiving yards than the next 5 guys, if you went down the list of receiving yards leaders, combined.
I didn't
That's
do
how
that,
much
Matt.
of this
That's
offense
hilarious.
I was like, how far do I have to go down before I get more yards than Tedero McMillan has for this season. And again, like the guy was a borderline 5-star. Like the guy was boys with your quarterback. Like they played together at Servite. Funny enough, I dug even deeper. Their number 2 receiving yards guy, junior tight end Kian Burnett, also played at Servite and was part of the same recruiting class as Fafita and McMillan in 2022. I mean, and McMillan's a great player. Like however you slice it, he's having a really good season, but you're seeing how the lack of a secondary option can hurt an offense. And it's even hurting his productivity because those are great numbers. Like to have over 1,000 receiving yards with 3 games left to play, full stop, no context needed, even in a pass happy offense, those are great numbers. But he still has 3 games of well under 100 yards receiving in Big 12 play. 3 of the last 4 opponents, in fact, have held him to under 100 yards for that game. And Fafita's having kind of a sophomore slump. I mean, last year as a freshman, he had one of the redshirt freshmen, had one of the very best seasons by a quarterback in Arizona program history, had the best completion percentage in program history, had a top 5 passing yard season, led them to the highest end of season ranking in 25 years. You get why that fan base was so excited he chose to stay when Jedd Fisch left for Washington. Like when coaches like that leave, especially at a program like Arizona that hasn't sustained success, I think as that fan base, you start waiting for the other shoe to drop. Like, okay, like is this his chance to go play for a blue blood now? Because I'm sure, like, in a similar situation, especially with, the transfer pool as it is, we'd be kind of holding our breath too after that kind of redshirt freshman season. And it just hasn't come together this year. You see those lack of secondary options besides McMillan manifest itself in a lot of ways. You mentioned the 10 interceptions, the offense in total, the Wildcats have 17 turnovers in 9 games. That's almost 2 a game. Like that's such a handicap for your defense and your team generally. If your offense is averaging 2 of those a game, only averaging 115 rushing yards per game, 4.1 yards per carry. They've had some like mid-season switch-ups in their offense too. Dino Babers, who is the longtime head coach at Syracuse and a long time as college offensive assistant before that. He's still nominally their offensive coordinator, but mid-season they're like, oh, we're gonna they said it was like a scheduled change. Like, oh, he's gonna pass the play calling duties off to the tight ends coach and pass game coordinator, which even if it was something you planned out, that just seems kind of weird. Like you feel like you want the guys to have the same voice, even if it's like, okay, well, we're working from the same book and it's just a different voice in the headset. Still seems kind of like a weird thing to do mid-season, And they've had some injuries.
Oh, absolutely.
Injuries in the offensive line. They had a really promising running back who they probably expected to be a big part of this team, Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt. He's been held out since their week 1 game because of, I think, what was listed as eligibility concerns. I'm gun shy about predicting big stuff for the Cougar defense, not because they haven't been fantastic this year, just a couple different times, Cincy and Kansas, where, games where you like look to the opponent. And I think Cincy and Kansas had better offenses than this Arizona team does. So it's not a perfect comparison, but those were ones where you went into it thinking like, okay, like I think the Cougar defense can continue doing good stuff against that team. You went on the road, and Cincy and Kansas are your 2 worst games of the season to this point. So that's why even though I think this defense is great, even though you aren't going to find many people, I think, more high on this defense than you and I are and what Shal Wood's done here in 1 season, you still don't feel like totally safe in predicting it. And their defense hasn't been that much better. They've struggled in Big 12 play, though I don't think you can untangle those struggles entirely from the fact that their offense hasn't been very good. They haven't rushed the passer that well, though their season sack numbers are about the same as U of H. They don't have one guy who has more than 2.5 sacks on the season. They've been a little bit worse at creating tackles for loss than U of H, but not demonstrably so. Funny enough, actually, Bobby, both of these teams' top tacklers, Arizona and U of H, both guys are products of different KDISD high schools. Dalton Johnson, originally from Katy High, leads the Wildcats in 66 total tackles, and obviously you have Michael Batten for the Cougs, originally out of Seven Lakes. This matchup, this Cougar offense versus Arizona defense matchup, it's going to be a big test for the Cougs offense. And usually when you say it's going to be a big test, you're facing an opponent who's really good, like the Utah and K-State defenses we saw from the previous 2 weeks, not a defense like Arizona that's largely been bad for the current season. But, and I think you kind of said this in different words when you were talking about Arizona, in those past 2 weeks against 2 good defenses, I don't think you're playing with too much pressure for you're the offense. Like, it's going to be a tough opponent. Like you kind of like know going out, okay, this is going to be a challenge. You're not freaking out if you have a bad series or 2. Like, you're not coming with a lot of pressure to score a lot of points. Like, it's going to be a low scoring slugfest and you're going to have to pick your spots, This
Yeah,
one, like,
absolutely.
this is an opponent you should still be scoring against. Even as a not that great offense, you still should be finding the end zone more than you did against Utah and K-State.
Yep.
I will say, since Zion Chris became your starting quarterback, you've faced two teams with varying degrees of poor defense. TCU and Kansas. Would you say that's accurate?
Yep.
We'll say TCU went very well. Like that is a good example. And Kansas went very poorly, though Zion got hurt on that one just after a quarter in. So maybe that's not a perfect comparison there. I don't know. Like that's the pressure. Like these last 2 weeks, it's like, okay, like I'm not really expecting the offense to, like, frankly, if the offense gets like high teens, low 20s, like that's basically what I expect him to do here. You do high teens, low 20s against Arizona, it's a bit more disappointing. I think I've come on here and tried to, I think, be very diplomatic about the fact that, hey, like this offense isn't great, but like they did a lot of what you needed them to do these past 2 weeks. You need to see more this week. You need to see something that's at least reasonably close to what you saw against TCU. It doesn't have to be exactly that, but you need to see more offensively. You can't be as conservative either. Like, and I think Willie Fritz said in his media availability, like he wants to do more with Zion Chris in the pass game. You know, you need to throw it 40 times.
Consistency is finally happening.
Yep. You're not going to throw it 40 times, but you're going to need to throw it more than like a dozen or Baker's dozen, which you've kind of done the last 2 weeks.
Yeah, and I think this is the kind of defense that you can actually go out and try that stuff on, right? You don't exactly see this defense of Arizona getting to the quarterback a lot, so maybe Zion Chris will have the time to kind of do some of those downfield reads and get the ball out.
No doubt. I'm excited to be in person for this one. It is about a 6-hour drive, 5.5 maybe if I get good traffic from where I live right now. So I'm excited to trek down there in person and watch the Cougars. Believe it or not, Bobby, I know I've mentioned this to you off air, but it was significantly cheaper to get tickets to this football game than it was to the men's basketball game in a few months that you and I will be out there in person for. I believe Arizona has less of a ticket. A vibes thing here, since we like to talk about vibes here every so often, I've been told on good authority from Arizona people, this is going to be a friends and family crowd for this game because they've not been very good. Like they've been a disappointing, not very good. Like there's a difference between a team that's like, okay, like the expectations aren't super high, which I would say is where U of H is right now. And a team where it was like, okay, we expected you to at least be like top half of the Big 12, and you've been emphatically not that. Also doesn't help they're going up against a men's basketball, one of the better men's basketball non-conference games on TV. So excited to be there with about like 150 Cougar fans and 11 to 12,000 Arizona fans on Friday night, hopefully seeing a Cougar win, but certainly not feeling guaranteed to see a Cougar win. Bobby, you want to talk about some picking games?
Let's pick some games, buddy.
So, quick reminder, I'm not saying this to rub it in. I just always like to set the score between the two of us. I currently lead with 1,376 Pawdbucks to Bobby's just under 1092, but still plenty of time in the season. And as I said last week, I am certainly not going to stop making stupid bets that will give you a chance to get back in it because I feel like that's the only honorable way to play the game. It would be very funny for me to be like, I'm putting $10 on like the total and just be like, Bobby, your picks. Did not do that. I have 3 picks for us this week. I took the first half over of 21.5, which is even odds, which I thought was pretty good, with 40 Pawdbucks. Also taking the game total under, going to switch that up a little bit, of 44.5, with also 40 Pawdbucks. And I'm taking UH first half money line plus 135 with 20 Pawdbucks. Buddy, what are your picks?
I'm sorry, say what your last bet was?
UH first half, the UH first half 3-way, excuse me.
Ah, gotcha. Okay.
I said money line in error.
No, it's all good. I'm going to take, with 50 imaginary Pawdbucks, I'm going to take Houston plus 1.5. With another 50 Pawdbucks, I'm going to take Houston money line. If you take somebody money line, if they are the dog, you got to take them with the points as well because you believe they're going to win, so you might as well double up your bet there. That's just a philosophy I have. That's a good way to lose double your money, though. Or double your Pawdbucks, I'm sorry. And then I'm going to do 25 imaginary Pawdbucks on the over of 44.5. I neither offense is very good. The Cougar defense is pretty good. I could see the Cougs putting up like 28. In this game being like a 28-17, which gets me there, kind of somewhere in there. It's going to be close. I probably shouldn't be taking this line, but I think it's going to be like 31-14, 28-17, 31-17, something like that.
I think yours is the more logical total pick. Like I I went under just again. I was actually originally going with the over, and I was just like, I don't know, I couldn't talk myself into it, and just kind of went with the under on vibes, so to speak.
Understood.
Understood. All right. Transitioning to Cougar volleyball, who had probably the most dramatic pair of results in terms of difference, like the highest high and the lowest low this week. Not that we're in any way big picture low on Cougar volleyball under David Rare. Like I want to preface anything negative-ish said here isn't a big picture negative, just kind of describing the performance. But we'll get the positive out of the way first. The Cougars went on the road to Ames, Iowa, play an Iowa State team that you'd played an extremely close 5-setter with in Houston. You've had a lot of really dramatic matches this season. I don't think you've had one more definitively dramatic than the one at the Fertitta Center about a month ago. And yeah, the first 2 sets were close in this one, but I'd go so far as to say, full stop. It was the first time this year that Iowa State has lost a 3, and Iowa State had just gotten through the ringer, the most brutal part of their Big 12 schedule. And they lost a decent amount of those, but didn't lose any of them 3-0 against some really good opponents. Cougars are the first team home away to beat the Cyclones in Big 12 play 3-0, which the Cougars did on Wednesday night. Really impressive. I think maybe your best 3-set offensive performance. Hit 267 for the match. Won a couple of like close ones, 25-22, 25-22 in the first 2 sets, and then pulled away, played a lot cleaner than your opponent, and really, really left minimal drama in a season where it's been nothing but dramatic finishes, almost both wins and losses for the Cougars. I really appreciated watching this one live, that the Cougars did not play with their food, took care of the Clones pretty easily to finish this one off. In the third set, before I passed to you, just a couple of individuals worth shouting out. It's been a really good run from Katie Corelli, both tied for team leading kills and hit a really impressive 478 as well. Angela Grieve also had 12 kills and had 7 digs for trouble as well. Kate Georgiadis, 18 digs, Annie Cook, 27 assists. Just a really good all-around effort in this one. Like really, really, really impressive. Also, a freshman performance worth noting. Addison Pohl had 6 total blocks as well. I was going to say, actually probably buried the lead of the most impressive performance. Annie Cook, I believe a program record 6 service aces in this one. Like that's unreal.
Insane.
That's insane.
That's insane. It's absolutely insane. Just to kind of put the cherry on top, holding a team to a negative hitting percentage in a set is just spectacular. Something that you should always pat yourself on the back for. Even if like you lose a match, if you hold somebody in a set to a negative hitting percentage, it means you were doing something well. Coogs obviously got the sweep here, but holding a team to negative 0.118 is quite a number to look at.
Yeah, and the Clones hit less than 100 for the entire match, which I think tells you you're doing something right defensively as well. Yeah, Annie Cook, 6 aces, Iowa State's entire team in those 3 sets. 2. That's really freaking impressive, man. Like no matter the opponent, and especially when it's a Big 12 opponent, a Big 12 opponent who beat you in your home court last year. Like not many teams beat the Cougars in their home court, and almost beat you in your home court about a month ago. 13 blocks to Iowa State's 4 as well. Like that's noteworthy there.
Absolutely.
All right, to the more negative, to the
not great,
inexplicable 3-0 loss to Texas Tech. You debuted your Houston blue uniforms, and unfortunately wasn't the best debut. I mean, Tech made 10 attack errors the entire match. Like that's them playing. Insane. Like that's them playing pretty well too. Like this is to some extent, although I don't think this is. I don't think you can use this to entirely explain away their loss, but also like they were on fire. They were playing volleyball like to the equivalent of a basketball team, full of like Tahad Pettifords. To go back to the when we were talking.
Who did we play in the NCAA tournament a couple of years ago? The Miami game a couple of years ago.
Oh Miami. Yeah,
in the NCAA tournament in basketball.
Yeah.
When like you were just like, they're shooting lights out. Like there's nothing. We can go down and we can play the best defense in the world. They're heat checking us from like 35 feet. It's like, well, sometimes the other team, I always like to say, sorry to interrupt you here. I always like to say I always like to say like those guys are on scholarship too. Like they're pretty good.
Yeah, it was
But
lazy.
go ahead, continue.
And to Tech's credit, like Tech was a very bad Big 12 team last year. I don't think they're a very bad Big 12 team. Probably on the balance of the season, and the balance of the season, they've probably been a bit worse than the Cougars, but they are certainly an improved team from a season ago. This isn't the team that, I don't know if they had, after this won 5 Big 12 wins. I don't know if they won 5 the entirety of last season. So it's a better opponent. And sometimes those teams will just play out of their mind. Still don't feel great about it. I think you somewhat paid the price because this team hasn't been great in first sets at times this year. Sometimes they've been fantastic. I mean, you came out there, it was at Kansas earlier this year and had a great first set in that one. Like it's not like you've never played well in the first set, but you've also had some clunkers and you didn't win a match where you dropped that first set until Cincy a couple weeks ago. And I think Cincy is a worse team than this Texas Tech team. Like I think they were already feeling it. You gave them some momentum and they really didn't look back. Like they looked at this, probably their coach reminded them of the game in Lubbock last year where the Coogs beat them pretty decisively. A number of players I know from previewing are back from that team. Like I'm sure this is one of those games. I know you don't circle, like teams don't literally circle games in the way we as fans think of it, but I'm sure like this was a game that their team had mentally circled, which isn't to no way cheapen it, but you clearly didn't match their intensity level. You clearly didn't match how well they were playing, which isn't, I'm not saying it's to knock the staff. I'm not saying knocking the young women who play on this team, but they just played a whole hell of a lot better than you. Like sometimes it's just simple.
Sometimes you come out flat. Sometimes the other team doesn't, and you get your teeth kicked in like this. Texas Tech 46 kills to U of H's 32 explains the sweep right there. They hit on the game or on the match 350. That's insane. If you have a set that's 350, you're excited. Just for reference, the Cougs didn't have a set that was even close to 350. In fact, the Cougs didn't have a set that matched Texas Tech's worst set in terms of hitting percentage. So just a game where sometimes you're a better team, but they're on scholarship too. They come out, they play out of their minds, and they absolutely dominate you. Shit happens.
Yeah, just really got outplayed.
And in a season where things have been inexplicable for this volleyball team, it's been confusing. These games happen.
Yeah, it's a less experienced, it's a younger team. Like you sometimes get those peaks and valleys. We were very much spoiled by having two teams back to back years with the 22 team and 23 teams that were very veteran dominated. Even though like last year, Kenna Sauer is a new face last year, but Kenna Sauer is not a new volleyball player. Like
right,
she came in there as one of the best Big 12 players. Like you have some players who I think will eventually develop in there. Like I really like what we've seen from Addison Pohl. Really like what we've seen from Ashlyn Bellamy. Like that's all fine and good, but you're still like you're having to learn things at the college level with a lot of key players and a lot of key spots and some players who are backups. Like the big what if for me, not related so much to this game, but man, like Kellen Morin is such an important, like she might not have been a frontline player as visible in the same sense as like Abby Jackson or Kenna Sauer, who I just mentioned, or even like Kate Georgiadis and even your setters like Annie Cook and Morgan Yanda before this year. But Kellen Morin at the net was so important for you.
Yep.
What's the one from DFW? Rachel Tullis as well. I feel like we haven't name checked her as much, but she was really critical loss off last year's team as well. Like you're having to figure out life without some really critical players, which sometimes like you have the Iowa State game where it's like, oh man, like we see how good these players can be. And then sometimes you have the Texas Tech game where it's just like, oh yeah, this is where we need to improve. This is sometimes the valleys of having a young player and kind of building this young roster.
Absolutely.
Speaking of valleys, Bobby, but unfortunately without, I think, the same peaks or same hope for excitement, Cougar women's basketball. Coming last time, we were talking in the immediate aftermath, like a few minutes after the game, of the Cougars losing to UTRGV. I will say with this UGA game, it might seem like I'm trying to find positives. It might seem like I'm offering like qualified, like, oh, it's not so bad. Like if this hadn't been immediately preceded by the loss to UTRGV, this game, the UGA game, I wouldn't feel amazing about this result. But considering this team is still currently missing Laila Blair, I don't think I really expected much of a different result. If you had found a way to lose to UTRGV or to beat UTRGV, to not lose to UTRGV, and this game had gone roughly how this game went, I wouldn't be too surprised by it. Like without your best score, this is gonna be a very difficult opponent, even when you were expecting to have Laila Blair. And we have criticisms of this team. We have criticisms of this program generally. You subtract any team's best 3 players, or I would say 3 of their best 4 players, you're going to need to adjust your prior somewhat. But really rough start to this one. That's been kind of one of those unfortunate negative carryovers from last season. You only managed 4 points in the first quarter, and that's such a difficult hole to get out of. You had to have a much stronger second quarter. The Cougs cut to single digits at halftime. Did a much better job over the course of the game at getting to the free throw line, but unfortunately couldn't take advantage of having a 20-9 edge there. Can't take advantage of that if you're barely making your free throws. There were some fundamental things that the Cougars did reasonably well in this one that haven't been the team's strongest things historically. Getting to the free throw line hasn't been something they've done that great, and they did it against a pretty good defensive team. They had fewer turnovers than UGA, which was actually a pretty welcome thing to see. You can't put the ball in the basket, though. There's only so much you can do. Like Aaliyah Love was your most productive player with 17 points and 9 boards, but she had to take 21 shots to get those 17 points. And if you shoot a hair under 25% like this team did, you're not going to win very many games that way. Certainly not against a team like Georgia that can defend as well as Georgia can. Bobby, what do you want to add to this one?
What can I add, man? It's just not good basketball, man. Yeah, I don't really have much to add. I agree with you that they're, losing your best player and 2 others that you assumed were going to be big players this year definitely hurts. Losing by 14 to Georgia isn't as bad as I think this is a better loss than the UT RGV one, if we're just being honest with one another. So that's kind of where I sit with this. I think this team is going to be fine, or is going to be what we thought they were. I haven't seen anything that makes me think that it's going to be any different.
Yeah. Wish I had more positives there, but not the best. In 3 days, the Cougars on Thursday will be hosting the Rice Owls will be hosting the Cougars at Tudor Fieldhouse on the campus of Rice University. Always like it when they're able to get that one in. I know most seasons the Cougars aren't necessarily able to get that in there. The Cougs actually were able to win this one last time out. Won in overtime at Tudor Fieldhouse right before Christmas last year, which, great news there. The Owls, I should say, fortunately for the Cougs, are coming in this off a win. They beat South Alabama tonight, 76-58. And have an interesting couple of data points for the season before that. They almost beat a South Dakota State team that has been very salty over the years. I think they were at least receiving votes going to that one, and then barely beat North Carolina A&T, and then I think more comfortably took care of business against South Alabama. Why was I blanking on that one? So actually a rivalry, and Rice has been, I think, somewhat better at women's basketball than they've been men's basketball, but it's one of the Cougars actually had done pretty well, even in some of the leaner years that Ronald Huey's been here. I was gonna say, I believe 2013-14 was Huey's first year here. No, 2014-15 was Huey's first year here, but Huey won his first 2 games in the series. Hasn't been played that much over the years. They didn't get played between the 2015-2016 season and the 22-23. 22-23, which was a double overtime Rice win, is actually the only win that they've gotten against the Cougars. The Cougs won an OT last season and then won the 2 previous ones. We're still fairly close. A split of home and road games under Huey, the Cougs. So hopefully one that the Cougars can get the mojo right against. Hopefully Laila Blair's back for that one. I'm pretty sure, at least we were told, that she was coming off a concussion protocol, which is never something you want to rush. So no criticism that they haven't played her in these past 2 games, but love to have her back and love to get a Cougar win. So we're going to close tonight with a segment theme. It's Cougar Tennis Corner. So the Cougar tennis program was at two different events that I'm going to talk about in the past week. That was going to lead off with your top singles player, Santa Strombaha, was at the, she got to the quarterfinals ultimately of the ITA sectionals event in Ann Arbor, Michigan, came up heartbreakingly close from doing what she would have needed to do to qualify for the NCAA individual championships, the fall championship. They'll be in Waco next week. If you want to know kind of the structure, there are 4 regional sites: East, Central, South, and West. Coogs were at the inexplicably at the central one at Ann Arbor, Michigan. From these events, all the semifinalists, the 4 of them, and then 2 quarterfinalists who win a playoff, they punch their ticket to the NCAA Fall Championship at the end of the month in Waco, which I just mentioned a moment ago, which are pretty big stakes. Santa opened up the event with a really nice revenge win over UT Austin's national top 100 singles player, Vivian Vrotsky, who Santa had faced and actually lost to, getting eliminated by her at the ITA Texas Championship that Bobby attended part of last month in Fort Worth. Beat her in straight sets, 6-4, 7-5 on the late morning of Thursday. Nice revenge win from that previous result. And of course, always nice to get one over on the Longhorns in any sport. Friday in her round of 16 match, Santa faced Iowa's Teresa Dejnikova, who had been an all-conference level player at her last program, South Alabama. In her junior year here, was having a nice fall season. I mean, just by virtue of making the sectional event, she'd been having a nice fall season. Santa won that one in straight sets again, including a dominant 6-0 win in that deciding second set. Faced off in her Saturday morning match against probably the best singles player that she's seen in the fall season, Nicole Kieran, one of the top singles players in the country, top 20 at the very least, and I want to say at least top 2 or top 3 singles player on the defending women's champs, Texas A&M, player who had not lost a match for non-injury retirement reasons since late September, and ended up making the finals of the sectional. I didn't see if she won or not, but very, very good player, suffice to say. She had a tough first set, Santa did, lost that one 6-1, came back and lost an incredibly close second set, did ultimately drop that one via the tiebreaker, lost the tiebreaker 8-6 to lose that one 7-6 and lose the match. I think the most frustrating part of the weekend was the quarterfinalist playoff loss. I alluded to earlier, like if you were a quarterfinalist, you got a chance to play against the other losing quarterfinalists with a chance to. So you have the 4 semifinalists, they punch their ticket automatically. Then the 4 quarterfinalists will play each other in separate matches. The winners of those matches get to punch their ticket to the NCAA Fall Championship. That way, wasn't able to watch this one on Sunday morning, so I cannot comment on the specifics, but UH head coach Kat Adamovich had some opinions about the officiating after the game. I will just read her tweet verbatim because I don't want to put words in Kat's mouth either way. Definitely not vamping here as I pull up that app on my phone here.
Yeah, she was pissed, man. Yeah. She was upset.
She said, "What are we going to finally address the officiating issues at ITA tennis? Each season, officiating keeps getting worse. Refs get more authority with zero accountability. And now the new rule just put players in an even tougher spot. It's painful to watch." And I talked with Kat about this. I'm not going to read our conversation verbatim on air, but in her opinion, the woman calling this had missed several key calls, such an important match. Like it's one of those situations where you understand you don't want to, like, you have fewer officials than you need. That's a universal issue. That's not just a tennis issue. That is a all college sports issue. You have fewer people able to officiate than you probably need in the most ideal circumstances. And in that sense, I'm sympathetic to the ITA. I'm sympathetic to the people that have to officiate. I am. But if these are going to have real stakes, if ITA sectionals is going to have these levels of stakes, you can't have this little infrastructure. If it means having Hawkeye, which is the automated system that, catches because it's a tough thing to call. Like there are some very close, like the ball might be right on the line and it's a really close one, and a human is going to commit an error in terms of being a perfect arbitrator in these situations. But there are also, there was not related to this, there was a men's end to a tournament. I want to say it was actually at Baylor, but I'm not blaming Baylor directly for this. It was a doubles one where a serve that was very clearly in got called out by the.
Oh yeah, I saw that.
I think I might have sent you that clip. It was laughably bad, and you have no recourse there. And if there's going to be the real serious stakes here, like the Rice tournament I'm about to talk about, not saying it's not important tennis, there's not NCAA stuff on the line here. Like, you don't need to have a chair umpire for every single match there. Like, you call, the players call their shots. If you disagree on it, have an official intercede, et cetera, et cetera. Like that doesn't require, that's not this level of stakes. But for like sectionals, for like a championship, for All Americans, you should have a higher level of officiating than I think we've gotten in college tennis. And I don't think I'm the most qualified person to say it, but I feel like I've seen enough to say that I don't believe Kat is off base here. I don't believe, and I will say, also add, I don't believe, Kat's necessarily, I think Kat is unhappy with the level of play here, but in her message to me, she said it goes both ways. Like, sometimes it is your day, sometimes it's not. I don't think she's saying that Santa was officiating away from going here, just that you would have hoped in such a critical match to her career and her season that you would have gotten better officiating. Sorry, it looked like you want to jump in.
No. I was just going to say, I understand not having Hawkeye, all that. I don't understand how you don't have at least a chair umpire at every match. And to your point, chair umpires aren't perfect. But that's kind of the thing that all these tennis players kind of... what I'm noticing is there's no tournament. Like, when I went to the tournament here at TCU, the ITA tournament, there was no umpire for every match. There was an umpire between, like, every 2 courts, maybe every 3 courts, and would just kind of turn around and see it. And there were some controversial calls that I kind of saw. But it feels like that's just kind of a thing that happens as they're growing up and they're D1 athletes. They can see the ball go in and out. And it's generally everyone's kind of like, oh yeah, that was definitely, But for things that have this much stakes on them, like NCAA championship bids and qualifyings and that kind of stuff, like, it's pretty important. You, at minimum, need a chair umpire. At best, you have Hawkeye. At minimum, you need a chair umpire. I think if you had, again, we're at this point where, to your point, there's not enough referees in every sport at the college. But, like, get some line umpires in there. Like, some line judges. You hear them at, like, the major tournaments and stuff. If not a chair umpire...
A lot of them are starting to go with the Hawkeye, too, honestly.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. But I'm like, even... worst case, you get some line judges, 2 line judges per, one for each. Hell, even 1 line judge to just kind of stand on the side where the serve's coming in, and then they can kind of move to the middle of the court at the net during play. Like, even something like that. I just feel like you need an arbitrator there.
I'm not saying 100-something Division I programs need to have a Hawkeye, but if you have to be a certain level of facility, like Michigan has, like, to host a sectional,
or
TCU
has.
Yeah, TCU has, or to host a serious ITA event, or to, like, hey, if you're going to host pretty far into the, the NCAA spring events, like, you're going to need, like, this level of, what have you. And man, I'm not saying Hawkeye's cheap, but, like, those Big Ten and SEC schools got a lot of money, man. Like, they got a lot of money. Like, they can afford the sport. The sport needs to start thinking, if you're not gonna pay the people, if you're not gonna make sure your officiating thing is solved that way, give your people some help. And that's not saying, like, oh, give your people some help with the artificial stuff, and don't let them get abused, but also don't not let frustrated coaches and players, like, at least have their say. Like, there's respectful limits. Like, there are boundaries that shouldn't be crossed, but it has not been a good fall for the sport and its officiating. And I don't want the negatives to override the positives, because it's been so cool in this fall season to see Santa Stromaha represent U of H tennis at a higher level than anyone's represented this program in a long, long time. We had very high expectations for what she was going to do, her resume at Grand Canyon, and I've been so impressed. I only wish it could have come with her also appearing at the NCAA Fall Championship, like I think she deserves to, but I think she's going to have a fantastic final spring season representing this program, and I'm excited for that. Was also excited to catch the Cougar tennis program. The rest of the Cougars were competing at the Rice Invite at the George R. Brown Tennis Center on the campus of Rice. The whole event went last Friday through Sunday, was out there Sunday morning for a good chunk of the action. You kind of said it when you were out at the various DFW events. It is so fun to be at that fall events and see, like, the full courts of tennis being played. Like, I spent most of the time watching one specific match, But I definitely like, it was cool. Like to, okay, like at one point I'm going to walk over and watch a couple of our other play. Like I kind of sit where I'm kind of splitting the courts, like watching those. And it's such a fun sport to watch live. Like you can only like have a basic knowledge, like you know the scoring system, you know when a serve is in or out. And like, that's really all you have. Like that's really it. You don't even have to know like the score of the match, like while it's going on. Like you can just like enjoy the back and forth, enjoy these incredibly high level athletes. And I've always kind of liked the sport, but it's been cool to get more into it. And it was really cool to like go to this event. Like it is just very fun to watch tennis in person. And believe me, your attendance is appreciated. There's not a lot of people out there. And it's so like, I feel like it was free. Literally, like all it cost me was my time and just like parking over at Rice, and just walked in there and watch it. Nice facility. I'll give them credit. Like I don't want to make a habit of saying nice things about Rice here, but it was kind of cool. Like the courts I was at faced onto South Rice Boulevard. Like a good amount of bleachers, but just, like not a crazy amount, like necessary. You actually had a chair back, which I thought was kind of cool, and just got to sit and mostly watched on court 9, Cougar sophomore Hedda Newtonen facing Jana Clemens, sophomore from Mississippi State. It was a flight finals. Flight's like you're part of the bracket, if you want to know what that terminology means. It was a really good back and forth 2-setter. You could tell, even though this is an event with like specific NCAA appearance ties, both of these athletes really wanted to win this one. You could see like the competitive energy and a little bit of healthy like competitive dislike between the two of them coming out there, which I thought was really cool. Hedda started out this one really strong. She got to a 5-2 lead in that first set. Credit to Clemens. She fought back, cut it to 5-4 before Hedda finished off strong, closing out the deciding game to take the opening set 6-4. Clemens was clearly playing better in that first set, and she definitely played better at the start of the second set, got out to a 4-0 lead. We'll note, kind of going back to our early officiating stuff from earlier, there was some funny business in the score in one of the set 2 games. I won't spend too much time on this, but can't remember if it was the second or third game of set number 2. In a tournament like this one, the players will, like, usually the players serving will call out the score before the point. And I'm 100% positive, because I was literally on the front row facing this, and Hedda was serving, I believe. She called out 30-15. Serves, there's the point. Hedda wins the point, which would make it 40-15. At that point, Clemens stated, oh, no, it's actually 30 all. 30-30. And stated that she had won an earlier point off a lob shot. And I'm not someone with a photographic memory, but should have been a moot point, because Hedda called out 30-15 earlier. If you had an issue with the score, you should have corrected it when she called it out before the last point. Not super important. And like the official ended up just telling him basically, hey, like, you guys can't agree on this. You're going to have to replay the point at 30-15. Hedda did a good job, though. Like, she fought back from being down 4-0. I think she was down as much as 5-2 later. Ended up taking the second set by a 7-5 score. Definitely played the cleaner game of the two competitors and got a really hard-fought win. And what's been an important fall season for her, because she missed, I think, basically all of last year prior to joining the Cougars. Really gutsy performance, and I'm glad to have watched it in person. Also caught parts of other matches. I watched Eva Seppa, Gabby Cortez, and the fall debut of new Cougar Elizaveta Morisova, who was part of that Grand Canyon group who came in here with Coach Adamovich. Really, excuse me, some water here. A really nice debut for Morisova. She beat Texas Tech freshman Elena Daskatlova, who'd been having a really good fall herself. She actually eliminated Cougar Valeria Krohotina from that ITA Texas event in Fort Worth, beat Daskalova in straight sets, 6-3, 6-4. She's a really physical player. Really excited to see her like work her way into the potential top 6 players for you. I think I believe it was an injury that kept her out of most of the fall action, but she played a lot for Grand Canyon last season, so I very much expect her to be part of the mix for your top 6 players come spring season. Cougars also got some good wins on the double side. Gabby Cortez and Krohotina won their flight of the doubles bracket on Saturday, defeating a Mississippi State pairing to cap off their perfect tournament, and Eva Sepa and Sophie Skoten also won matches over pairs from Oklahoma and Texas. So a lot of good stuff to cap off the fall season, which the Cougars should now be done with, since I don't believe anyone will be representing at the NCAA individual championships next week in Waco. We don't officially have a spring schedule yet, but I expect we'll have one here in not too long. And around late January, early February, we will have the start of the usual spring season. And we'll of course come back here and talk about if anything develops, or once we have the official schedule to kick around here on the show. Amazingly, Bobby, I know we always talk about this is going to be the episode where we go short. 90 minutes of Cougar talk. I'm not mad about it. I love talking about this team. Take us home, friend.
All right, guys. Well, that is it for this week's podcast. If you are still here, you're an absolute Cougar fan and maniac, just like we are. We want to thank you so much for listening. Sam and I do this because we love the Cougs. We've loved the Cougs since we started going to U of H. So for anyone who's new, know that we do this every week and we will keep it free for you on this. If you do want to throw some money behind us, though, we greatly appreciate it for our time and our work. To do this, hosting this podcast, paying to host it, to be able to load it up to iTunes and all those places for you guys. Does take a little bit of money, not a ton, but this streaming service isn't free either. So we use that money mainly for hosting this. So if you subscribe to our Patreon or you like what you hear, we greatly appreciate it. If you decide you do want to listen, you want to throw some money behind the pod, we appreciate it. You can go to patreon.com/SH podcast. As little as $5 a month. Sam is doing an amazing job already this basketball season, putting out instant reactions to the basketball games.
Pods.
Yeah, we're just calling them bonus pods. The goal is to do them for every game this year. I'm thinking Sam's going to hold himself to that, but in case something happens, 2 for 2
right now, man.
I don't want to guarantee it 100%. But that is the goal, is to get one of those out every game. I'll be hopping on every so often. I was planning on hopping on this time, but like I said, my parents came in. But that's $5 a month for that.
At midnight.
Yeah. $5 a month to get those. If you want to throw more, we are more than appreciative of that. We appreciate you guys so much. If you want to give us any feedback, we love to hear that. That feedback can be sent to us on Twitter at SH Podcast. If you miss Dustin and you just want to know what he thinks about things, you can find him at podcast.bsky.social.
Bobby, I did Blue Sky tonight.
Oh,
Kevin Cobb.
Oh, man.
Look, I'm just trying to cut my social media use generally. This isn't directed at any one specific app, but I was told by our co-host when I saw him in person. We ate dinner and went to the game, and along with my father, and had just a great old time. But he's like, there's actually more sports stuff on there. There's actually legitimately a good amount of sports content on there right now, which I'm not some big baby who has to have sports everywhere, but I'm sorry if your app has just nothing for sports on it, which was what Blue Sky was a year or so ago. It's not going to have any purchase with me. There's got to be at least, you got to have at least a little bit of that for me.
Right.
And he insisted, not incorrectly, I would say, that's there. So it's all right, I'll, and he's genuinely doing it. If you were on Blue Sky, Dustin is genuinely doing a great job keeping up that feed. You're getting Cougar stuff. You're getting he's doing a really good job, the general Big 12 basketball stuff too. If you want to see how the conference is doing this and future opponents and all that, he's doing a fantastic job. Dustin is a guy with a ton of Cougar insights, and I think he talked about hey, I'm going to find my podcast Cougar project here, kind of in my post wanting to be a psycho that hosts a week in week out show like we did, and I think he's found it there. So if you're on the fence about downloading Blue Sky, Dustin will at least make it somewhat worth your while to do so. That's my pitch.
All right, so if you want to find Dustin and apparently Sam now,
occasionally
you can, if you want to stop in and say hey to him, you can go to podcast.bsky.social. He appreciates all that. I was actually talking to him about it as well, and he is very appreciative of the Cougar fans that are over there. So you can find him there. If you don't want to be on social media like Sam, you're cutting back, whether it's Facebook, Twitter, or Blue Sky, or Instagram, whatever you're cutting back, and you want to still send us some feedback, Snapchat, yep. Yeah, you can send us an old-fashioned email, shpodcast@gmail.com. We appreciate all that. Like I said about the Patreon, we appreciate all you guys. If you're still listening, you're a rock star, but you're also sick in the head like we are. And Sam, as always,
go Coogs.
All right. Go Coogs. Let's go.